Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Welcome to the podcast where honesty meets humor and the messy parts of life finally get their spotlight. I'm your host, Tranisha, and here we dive into dating, friendships, healing, and all the awkward in-betweens. Because here's the truth, growth isn't always pretty, but it's always real, so let's get into it. You ever dated an older man because you thought to yourself, he's more mature, but then you realize he communicates like a teenage boy going through puberty? Yeah, that's me and that's probably you too. But then we realize age does not equal maturity, right? What really shapes how people show up in relationships isn't just how old they are. It's how they are raised and the emotional language they were given. So in today's episode of Cringe and Crumble, we're talking more emotionally fluent, dating men raised by a different generation. We're going to get straight into it because we're going to understand why older doesn't always mean more emotionally mature, why some younger men are surprisingly better at feelings, and how to spot emotional fluency at any age. So let's start with the classic category. We've got those men in their mid 30s, 40s, and 50s. These are our Gen X and elder millennials. Most of them were raised by baby boomers or early Gen X parents. You know, that whole generation of like, suck it up and deal with it. You know, masculinity is key. You know, emotions are not a thing you talked about. You pushed through it, you worked, you provided. Masculinity was defined as being strong, don't complain, you can handle it. These are those men. These are the same men who heard over and over again that boys don't cry, man up, and stop being soft. So now you meet them as grown men and you're like, hey, how do you feel about this? And then they're like literally buffering and they're just like, what do you mean? How do I feel about this? Because they don't have feelings. They do have feelings, but they just don't know how to compute. It's just that they feel a lot. They just weren't given the vocabulary for those feelings. You know, love for them often looks like providing and fixing and showing up logistically. And if you think about a lot of your friends' parents or even your dad, they're kind of like the same exact human almost. If you think of that whole generation where they are not emotionally connected in a sense to the kids or the wife or anything. They're more so, I'm here to provide. I show up for Christmas. Yay. And it's not that emotionally fluent individual that we kind of see in this newer generation. They don't know how to name their emotions. They don't know how to sit in discomfort. So therapy for them, if you think about it, was either a last resort or it's some type of luxury. And the vulnerability, though, was very risky. And to them, as always, privacy is survival. So let me give you like a really life example, right? I once dated this older guy, and on paper, he had it all together. Like he was a CEO of his own company. Yeah, he had a lot of money. Money was never a problem, stability, you name it. But emotionally, he communicated like a child and it always boggled my mind. I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, like, how do you run a multi-million-dollar company and have the thought process and the emotional tools of a teenager? Like, I just couldn't get it around my head. And he had this deep phobia as well, which was really irritating about people not liking him. So he felt like he had to always show up for everyone. I mean, your clients, his friends' kids, all of their events. And you're like, these are not even your kids. What are you doing? He would always never like necessarily show up for himself and not at all consistently for me. And also, I just remember him being divorced and he longed for a relationship with his kids. But instead of actually addressing the emotional stuff between them, he would just buy them any and everything. You name it, gifts, trips, clothes, whatever they ever wanted, just because he was praying and hoping that as many gifts as he provides for them, that maybe one day they're going to pick up the phone and talk to him. So here you have it. There's a man who is powerful in business, well respected publicly, very grown on paper. But when it came to emotional conversations and boundaries or even hard truths, it was like dealing with a scared little boy desperately trying not to be abandoned. And I'll be honest, did it make me not want to date older again? No, because I kept going back to older and established because in my brain, It was like my little personality trait because in my Delulu, if he's older and successful, it automatically told me that he knows how to love well. But spoiler alert, no, he didn't. No one else did. And I lived in my Delulu, which is fine. At least I can name my Delulu. Can you name your Delulu? But that's when it really hit me though, that material success and emotional maturity are not the same thing. And I think that's something you learn over time. So now let's slide over to the younger men. Now, the younger men are in their 20s and early 30s, and these are late millennials and Gen Zs. All of them were raised by more emotionally aware Gen X or millennial parents, and the entire parenting landscape has shifted drastically. It went from be tough to using your words, from man up to how are you feeling right now? They grew up seeing people talk about anxiety and depression online and hearing that mental health matters. They learned crying isn't automatically weakness. Setting boundaries is actually really normal. And if I feel is a sentence starter and not a threat. But are younger men perfect? Absolutely not. Some of them are the most emotional, unavailable, inconsistent men who are also allergic to commitment. Let's be real honest. But compared to the older generation, a lot of them have a very different starting point when it comes to emotional language. And they're more likely to say things like, I feel hurt when that happened, or I need space to process, or I want to do better next time. And they may not have their entire life mapped out, but in terms of emotional vocabulary and openness, they can be miles ahead of that older generation. Now, I want to be really clear here that this isn't all. Now, I want to be really clear here. This is where the nuance matters because this is not about older men are bad and younger men are good. There are older men in therapy doing the work and unlearning toxic masculinity and also reading books and apologizing for some of their 25-year-old selves. And then there are the younger men who weaponize the therapy language, which is very dangerous and which is also a major red flag. You know, those little catchy words of like, they can say triggered or boundary or attachment style, but still avoid accountability and play mind games. Now, emotional fluency is not automatically just because he's younger, and it's not impossible just because he's older. What we're talking about is probability and patterns, not a rule carved in stone. But instead of asking, is he older or younger? The better question is, what emotional era did he come from? And has he done the work to evolve beyond that? Think about it. Now, what is that emotional fluency? Emotional fluency is the ability to notice what you're feeling. You can name it, you can also sit with it, and communicate in a way that's honest and respectful, and also grounded. It's not about being dramatic or oversharing. It's about being clear. An emotional fluent person might say, I'm not actually angry, I'm hurt. Or I feel anxious about this conversation, but I want to have it. And even in some cases, I don't agree with you, but I still care about you. Now, why does this matter in relationships, you may ask yourself? It's because without emotional fluency, conflicts turn into silent treatments or explosions. You're always guessing how they feel. Small issues never really get resolved, and they just get buried. With emotional fluency, you can repair after a disagreement. You can also know where you stand, and there's room for you to be human and for them to be human too. So now you're probably asking yourself why we go for older men. A lot of us were sold this story. I was sold this story that if you date older, they're more stable, more mature, and more ready. Older men are supposed to be established and clear about what they want, and they do not play games. But if his upbringing never included emotional language and he never did the work to build it as an adult, you end up with what I had with the CEO. His life is together on paper, but emotionally, that man's drowning. And he can run a company, lead a team, take care of responsibilities, but he can't say, I'm afraid, I feel guilty, I don't know how to show up for you right now, which is the most basic thing. on so many levels, but to him and to other men, it's like the hardest thing they've ever had to say. And then instead of doing the inner work, some men lean into this performance. They buy things, they overextend themselves, they try to keep everyone liking them while never actually being present with themselves or the people they love. And to me and to anyone, that's not maturity. So it's not about age, it's more so about that alignment. Here's the heart of it. By this point in life, most of us aren't just looking for who's the most impressive on paper. We want someone who makes us feel seen, someone who's curious about our inner world, and someone who doesn't just check out every time tension shows up. If you think about it, a younger man is more aligned emotionally than an older man who hasn't done the inner work. But I also want to say this, dating younger comes with its own set of realities. You got a different lifestyle stage and maybe less financial stability and a lot more of that. So this is not me saying only date younger from now on, but it's me just saying don't ignore emotional fluency just because the resume looks impressive. Put emotional alignment on the same level as age stability in your life stage when you're evaluating someone. It's a full picture, and I like to think about that. And with that being said, I want to give you a little reflection moment here because whether you're single or dating or in a situationship, you're still trying not to label. But ask yourself this, because I ask myself these same exact questions. When we have conflict, what does he do? Does he shut down, deflect, or blame? Or can he stay in the conversation even if it's uncomfortable? That's question number one. Now, question number two, can he name his own feelings without making me responsible for them? Does he A, say, you made me feel, or I felt hurt when? Now, does he ever apologize meaningfully? Not just, oh, my bad, but I see why that hurt you and I want to do better. It's a big one. And is there space for my emotions too? Or does the reaction always take up the whole room? Ask yourself, is there space for my emotions too? And last but not least, do I feel safer, calmer, or even more understood around him, or more anxious and confused? You can even journal this at some later point, but really ask yourself these questions because what emotional language did I grow up with? What emotional language does the person I'm dating seem to speak? Do your language align or am I constantly translating? And I have to ask myself the same questions. Why was I choosing men who look mature but weren't emotionally safe? What part of me still believed I had to earn emotional presence by being understood, low maintenance, or grateful for the bare minimum? That's a powerful question. When I got honest about that, my type started quietly rebranding itself. And how I started to spot that emotional fluency is here are a few green flags at any age. He can say I feel without making it a weapon. He doesn't disappear when things get a little bit hard. He's open to growth and therapy, books and honest conversations. And it doesn't mean he's perfect, but in these green flags, it means he's available and emotionally, not just logistically. So with that being said, maybe he's 27. Maybe he's still figuring out what city he wants to live in or what his next career move is. But if he knows how to hold space for you, can reciprocate emotional values, is willing to own his own stuff and grow with you, to me, that's not settling. That is choosing peace and choosing connections and choosing someone raised or re-raising himself with the language of empathy and not ego. Maybe the real question isn't, is he older or younger? Maybe the real question is, can we speak the same emotional language? Because I would rather build with someone emotionally fluent and still evolving than someone fully established on paper, but emotionally stuck in the Stone Age. Until next time, choose a person who listens to your emotions, not just the one who looks good on your timeline. Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Until next time.